in financial aid as a profession see admissions a little bit like a window and financial aid like the door, to your point, right? That we may sometimes be seen as a gatekeeper or just who's in, who's out kind of a thing. And really it's trying to walk that line in the inches, in the trenches, right? Student by student, major by major, goal by goal. How is it that you can achieve everyone's academic dreams and institutional goals?
Welcome to Small College America, a podcast dedicated to exploring the roles and value of small colleges in higher education. I'm Dean Hoke, co-founder of Edu Alliance Group, and I'm joined by my co-host, Kent Barnds, Executive Vice President of Augustana College. Kent?
Thanks, Dean. Joining us today is Maximo Flint-Morgan, who serves as Director of Financial Aid at Moyne College, a private Jesuit institution in Syracuse, New York, where he has led the financial aid office within the Division of Enrollment Management since February of 2021, which incidentally is a pretty long time in the world of financial aid professionals. So glad to have someone with your experience. Maximo is a Syracuse-area professional with a broad background spanning higher education, nonprofit leadership, and business. Maximo previously served as Associate Director of Financial Aid at Syracuse University, where he developed and managed comprehensive communication strategies for financial aid services. He is deeply committed to the profession, and he is an active contributor to the New York State Financial Aid Administrators Association, which supports training and professional development for financial aid officers across the state. He's also a frequent speaker to students and families in their support network, offering practical guidance on FAFSA completion, scholarship, and financial planning. Outside the office, Maximo's a devoted dad with a passion for soccer and world music. Maximo, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you.
Oh, thanks for having me, Kent and Dean. I really appreciate this.
Well, it's unusual for us. We try to speak with a variety of groups and organizations, small college world, but we rarely get a chance to talk to somebody that works directly in the field of financial aid. So I want to thank you very much for coming on. And I think it's a subject that that's somewhat undervalued in how people think about and the importance of it all. I have a tendency to think people may think it's more of a mechanical thing than it is real live human beings doing some real serious work. So thanks for being on. Let's begin kind of with the basics. Number one, of course, financial aid probably wasn't where you were going to begin your career, but you've kind of taken a interesting path to get to where you are, even though you've been involved in the business for quite some time. A couple of questions I have for you. How did you first find your way into this type of work? And with that, give us a sense of what your role really looks like today at Moyne.
Sure. Well, I got to tell you, financial aid isn't a college major, so I agree with your assessment there that many folks aren't really looking at this as a career or something of that nature. But financial aid is an area where folks have to learn some expertise, at least a lot of folks, right? So for me, I completed my undergraduate studies in 2008. And if you recall at that time, the sky was falling and there were not a lot of job opportunities. And so for me, I distinctly recall I had two. I had one for Taco Bell and another one to work as a contractor for the Department of Education. And as much as I love Taco Bell and I eat there to this day, I don't mean to disparage them. I did not follow my restaurateur dreams at that point. And I joined up to work in financial aid, kind of on the back end, right? So I worked for a Department of Education contractor who was doing customer service for schools, utilizing their central and common origination and disbursement system. And that's how I began, right, in 2008. And from there, having learned and trained and met folks and made some connections around the way, I ended up finding that I really thrive in financial aid. And it really applies to my skill set a little bit in terms of having to work with people, explaining rules and regulations to them, and then also crunching some numbers and doing some adding and subtracting, if you will. And so my role now, to the second part of your question, really is helping lead a team to not only work inside of the Jesuit values and frameworks, but also to help students complete their degrees and achieve their educational aspirations in order to further their own lives, right? So that looks like either enabling staff to really do the work that they want to do and that they see themselves succeeding in, as well as making sure that the institution remains compliant and eligible for all of the aid programs that we and our students rely on to complete their academic aspirations.
Right. Well, Maximo, let me kind of go down a more general path because we really didn't give much justice to the school at all. Tell me a little bit about your institution,
Sure.
size. Give me kind of the elevator speech.
Absolutely. So we're the youngest, and I like to say best looking Jesuit institution in the country. We're within a network of 26 other Jesuit schools and colleges. We were founded in 1945, founded initially as co-ed and have been co-ed ever since, obviously. Now we are lucky enough to be led by the first and so far only female lay president in Jesuit school history. Her name is Linda Lemira, an excellent professional to work alongside. Our school is about 2,800 students, about 5,500, maybe 600 graduate students, spanning business, health, as well as some doctoral programs. So I believe that we have a doctorate of nurse practitioner program, as well as an EDD program. So all the way from bachelor's through doctorate inside of Syracuse. And we pull students from downstate from us, right? So the greater New York City area, as well as our local backyard, if you will, central New York, as well as all throughout the country. We recently became a Division I NCAA school, which means our students are coming from all over. We have a small but a relatively mighty international student population,
Right.
as well as students who are studying all sorts of things, right? So from philosophy to nursing, maybe some accountants, maybe some folks who are religion majors, really the length and breadth of a liberal arts education, as is inside of the Jesuit tradition, right? Trying to educate the whole person, mind, body, and spirit, men and women, with and for others.
Very good. Ken?
Well, we want to talk specifically about financial aid. When students and families think of financial aid, they often think of paperwork. They have read the articles that say that it takes a PhD to complete the FAFSA, and we'll talk about the FAFSA in a little bit more. But what are they missing about the actual work you do, what your office does? I mean, it's not that you have a drawer full of cash that you're handing out. And I appreciate the fact that you mentioned how important compliance is. So can you give our listeners some insight into what does a financial aid office do?
Yeah, excellent question, Kat. Really, financial aid is both educating, counseling, as well as rule reading and number crunching, right? So if anyone has questions about financial aid and the process itself, would highly recommend that you reach out to your local financial aid administrator. We help folks apply for the FAFSA often, even when they're not attending our institution, because we know there's a financial aid administrator on the other side who will really appreciate usable information. To your point about paperwork, in the past 5, 10 years, financial aid in particular has moved to a digital format, right? So we're now in the land of apps. Students can start and submit their FAFSA on their phone. Parents can hop in and do their portion on their phone and submit it in the matter of minutes. Since FAFSA simplification, it has in fact gotten easier and has come with a little bit less friction. Now, that's a story for most folks if you fall into the two-parent household, two students, kind of your average traditional situation. If your life is more complicated than that, that's where a financial aid professional can really help you, right? So if you're in a single-parent household, maybe there's a divorce or a separation, maybe the student's parents are incarcerated and they're in foster care and they just need assistance, really reaching out and working with someone to go line by line with you can help you in the long run avoid multiple verifications, having to submit multiple pieces of documentation that substantiate how you've been living, how you've been affording to live. Although you may know, the FAFSA needs to reflect that information a little bit. And that's where a professional can really counsel you, a student, or you, a family, to walk through that path. The FAFSA is an annual process if you need money every year. So when I'm in a room full of people in front of parents and students, I usually walk them through this exercise and I ask, raise your hand if you need free money. And I'm hoping that everyone raises their hand because a FAFSA, if you're going to college and you want to be considered for free money or all possible funding sources, is really the starting point. And so although it can seem like a big mountain that you have to climb all by yourself, it doesn't have to feel that way in reality. There are folks who can be there to help you, and there are ways where you can make this a little bit easier on yourself. And so hopefully, through chatting with you guys and through other outreach, financial aid professionals can kind of shout that from the mountaintops that, hey, we're here, we're real people that can help you answer the FAFSA, submit the FAFSA, and make sure that you're going to be awarded every dollar that you're eligible for and answer your questions and what ifs and what if I did this or what if I did that. And I get these all the time, Kent. I mean, whether that's from staff here or faculty here at my job who work in higher ed but don't really know the ins and outs, or from folks on the street. I remember a couple years ago with the FAFSA delay, I was on our local news channel 9 and same thing, right? There's a camera and you have a conversation. But then like a day and a half later, I'm pumping gas at my car and some guy walks across the parking lot and says, "Hey, I saw you. My kid's trying to like go and do this FAFSA thing. How do I do it?" And it comes up from everywhere. And so if anybody has a question, I would encourage you to reach out, whether that's at a local community college or at a Jesuit institution or wherever. Try and find a financial aid professional, ask your question. You can certainly find me on LinkedIn or through email, what have you, and I'll do my best to assist.
Maximo, I really appreciate the emphasis on counseling and then that general sort of professional competence. There's a kinship among financial aid officers, which I don't think is fully recognized. You don't mind, and you said this, you don't mind walking a student through or a family through all of the practices, even if it's not to benefit Lemoyne, because you're so committed to access. So I really appreciate that. I'll turn it to Dean for his next question.
Well, let's kind of keep going down that path. And this is particularly, I mean, Lemoyne, as you already said, is a Jesuit institution, and you have a strong commitment to access. But financial aid today, I mean, it's more than just about the numbers. From an administrator's point of view, it's very strategic. In many ways, you help hold the keys to whether a student is going to be able to attend or not, or at least that would be somewhat of a perception. I'd like your comments in terms of how you see the business in terms of formula versus strategy. And also, do you get the pressure, particularly about enrollment? I mean, how do you address that issue?
Sure. So yeah, my office, my department reports through enrollment management, as do a lot of other financial aid offices. There's a couple of other models where financial aid might report through like student success or res life or something like that. But I would imagine that those folks are also focused on retention, which is also an enrollment issue, right?
Yes.
So in regards to your question about pressure, right? Sure, right? There's pressure all over the place. In particular now, as we're in a regulatory environment that's a little bit more just rocky, right? It's jagged in places where it wasn't jagged before. And it'll reach out and touch you if you're not careful. So for us, it's really trying to whittle down to the mission and doing the best that we can. A lot of folks in financial aid as a profession see admissions a little bit like a window and financial aid like the door, to your point, right? That we may sometimes be seen as a gatekeeper or just who's in, who's out kind of a thing. And really it's trying to walk that line in the inches, in the trenches, right? Student by student, major by major, goal by goal. How is it that you can achieve everyone's academic dreams and institutional goals and all of these things? So in Jesuit speak, in our institution, we call it cura personalis, care for the whole person is one side, right? And cura apostolica, care for the institution is the other. And these things sometimes are at odds. In other times, they come in to the same point. and can really make your decision making quite easy. So it's trying to find those spaces where these things align and then executing that again and again. And when they don't align for whatever reason, finding a way to still walk in your values, to still be able to go home and sleep at night about what you did and how you did it. And that can vary from school to school, major by major, a cohort by cohort, right? It's challenging and it will continue to be a challenge for the foreseeable future. And so it's not a profession that I would encourage everyone to enter into lightly because you're oftentimes unsung. You're going to work hard. You're going to feel really great about the work that you do, but it's not going to be the most glamorous and fun place to be all the time. And that's something that you got to deal with. So, in terms of dealing with that pressure and kind of how we navigate at this time of year, it's kind of our peak time, right? May 1st being our national matriculation kind of deadline, and making sure that we're really looking at all of the enrollment targets, all of the KPIs or the significant metrics, and making sure that we're within them so that we can take care of the institution, practice cura apostolica, and care for the whole person as you review your cohort and the incoming students. You are your cura personalis side.
Very good. Kent?
Well, speaking of sharp edges and turbulence, the recent past has included a lot of changes in the world of financial aid. FAFSA simplification, which I think most people would say didn't maybe go as smoothly as anticipated. So, from your seat at a small, private, mission-driven institution, with the dramatic changes that have happened, what's working and what's not?
And I gotta hand it to you. You called small turbulence for the FAFSA simplification rollout. I'm gonna call what you said the greatest understatement of the year. Yeah, so the FAFSA simplification is also known as the FAFSA delay year, right? And so once we got over the delay, it was really working. I will say that the simplified FAFSA is in fact a simplified FAFSA. It has provided a better user experience for our students and their families. That's working. We've seen a relative reduction in verification selection by the Department of Education. For folks who may not know, the verification process is almost like a FAFSA audit. So the department sends schools a list of students who need to be verified. Schools then reach out to students for their documentation and forms and then have to run this audit. That number has decreased, and that's been helpful, right? That has, in fact, alleviated what some would call the administrative burden on the institution. So those things are good. Those are net positives that we all in financial aid are welcoming and will rejoice for. Because if there's another FAFSA delay, who knows what happens? If there's an increase in verifications, that's increased administrative burden that will mean that we can't do other things because we have to focus on these things. So that's what's working for sure. The FSA ID generation process also has been improved. We've seen a decreased friction from that end. And we've seen increased data flow, in particular with my state, the great state of New York, between the FAFSA and the TAP application. The New York State Tuition Assistance Program, or the TAP grant program, relies on FAFSA information, and that data flow has improved. We've seen an increase in the utilization of TAP, and that's been great. Other things have happened, but that's what's working great. I forget if you had asked me what's not working great.
We'd love to know what could still be improved, because I know that there's a list there as well.
Yes, so I can tell you we would really love some solid guidance on what comes next regarding the schedule of reductions or the loan proration piece. So by the end of this aid year, so June 30th, 2026, that's the end of the aid year. July 1 is the beginning of the next aid year. We have to implement this schedule of reductions, or what other folks call loan prorations, right? So before, anyone who attended at least half time, and that's defined by the institution, who lives in standard terms, was going to be eligible for a federal direct loan, whether that's sub, unsub, or plus if you're eligible. Starting July 1, you got to be full time to be eligible for the aforementioned amounts, which are 30 or 5,500 for undergrads, 20,500 for grads, and plus loans are, 20,500 for the parents starting July 1, the folks who are grandfathered. But if you want to be eligible for those amounts, you have to really be full-time. If you're not full-time, if you're not full-time by one credit, you are going to be eligible for less. And that means that the financial aid office has to recalculate your eligibility now that you're not full-time, which is a drastic difference than if you're just at least half-time, you're eligible for all of it. If you're below, you're eligible for none of it, which is fine. It's not something that we can't overcome. There's computers and the internet. I'm sure that we can walk through this. I think the issue that comes up is we have students who are starting in a matter of weeks and we don't have finalized regs. And that is really something that can hurt us, right? Because as an institution, one thing that we have to do is make sure that if a student is eligible as calculated by the FAFSA or as adjudicated, if you will, by the FAFSA, then we have to calculate need and run our processes. And if you don't, or if you withhold aid from a student, you get in trouble, right? And that's something that should be, right? Because a person in my chair should not be telling a family for whatever reason, whether they are or are not eligible for a Pell Grant as this person sees fit. It should be standard across the board because a lot of nefarious actors can kind of sneak in there. But if you don't have rules, it's hard to figure out who is eligible and who's not eligible. And so then you get into this, well, do I get in trouble if I don't offer it? Or if I do offer it, but I'm wrong, maybe I'll get in trouble then. And then I put the institution at risk because we messed up on this thing or the other thing. So really having rules right now for the loan proration or the schedule of reductions is keeping me up at night. That's something that's hurting every day because we have students who are starting, in particular, our graduate programs in May in a matter of weeks. And they're going to be borrowing for the 26-27 year, and they're going to be impacted by the schedule of reductions. And we are having a hard time trying to set that up. Our software vendor is having a hard time setting up our software to calculate this. So that's been a challenge. Would love to see a Pell Grant increase to keep up with inflation. That's another thing that I would love. I mean, I have a long list, Kent, so I don't want to pontificate forever and ever, but increasing the Pell Grant would be awesome. Among other things, fully funding SEOG would be great, and federal work study would really help create some tangible benefits for my institution, I'm sure others across our country. So that's my top 4, if you will.
Well, that's a great list, and I'll just put a plug in. Contact your local representative in the House of Representatives and your senator to help make sure the rulemaking gets out to folks and that these changes are enacted. So thank you. Dean.
Well, Maximo, why don't we talk particularly, and I'm going to probably aim this more towards the traditional students and possibly thinking about the juniors and their parents, the high school juniors. The world has changed so much in college financing, I think, even more so than 5 years ago. If you were sitting across from a family that had a high school junior or even a high school sophomore, what 2 or 3 things would you tell them to do today?
For a junior and a sophomore, okay. I have a sophomore, so I sit across from her almost every day.
Okay. So what do you tell her?
Yeah, we have conversations about what are important things to succeed academically. In particular for juniors, I would encourage everyone to consider not just what is it that a student wants to study, but what environment they would thrive in and what they see their educational environments looking and feeling like. So, as an example, if your high school has a graduating class of under 100 people, a college with an undergraduate student body that's measured north of 15,000 might not be the best place for you academically because you're not necessarily exposed to that kind of volume of just human beings, right? So you want to make sure that you're looking at institutions of a varying size to find where the pitfalls are if you can see yourself there. In regards to financing for the juniors and maybe the seniors, it's really about knowing and understanding what the Parent Plus loan limits are moving forward for our foreseeable future, which Parents can only borrow from the federal government for undergraduate education a total of $65,000 per student. And that's capped at $20,000 per year. It does not require a math major to figure out that 20 times 4 is not 65, right? So you want to make sure that you're borrowing appropriately if that's the way that you want to go. Students, undergraduate students, can really borrow a little bit on their own from the federal government. It's $5,500 for freshmen, $6,500 for sophomores, $7,500 for juniors and seniors, unless you meet some other criteria. So adding that up and matching that up to the cost of a place, you should really know that you might hit a cap along the way, which means that maybe you might want to consider a private bank or some private lender for that additional amount that you might need. For a sophomore, really making sure that you make a college choice that will fit you, will make sure that if you finance and what you finance will actually pay off for you. Because if you really want to, if you're going to borrow, graduate. If you borrow but don't graduate, that's really a loss for the institution as well as for the family. So making sure that the fit is great is really paramount. For juniors and seniors is being aware of the mechanics so that technically you can make the right decisions. There are still loan repayment programs and loan forgiveness options, whether you borrow federal or private. I'll give you an example. HRSA.gov, HRSA.gov can show you if you're interested in healthcare, like nursing, or being a doctor or a social worker, will offer you programs that will pay the loans back of the healthcare worker, not for the parents of the healthcare worker. And so that might change how you borrow technically, not necessarily if you borrow, but how you borrow technically. And so you want to make sure that if healthcare is where your student is kind of eyeing up, that you're aware of these opportunities so that you borrow in a way that will benefit you the most, not only while you're in school, but after school in your working life, in the student's career choice, right? And that really takes awesome counseling to be aware of these things, right? Like you really need one-on-one and kind of advanced navigation of the processes. But you also want to make sure that your student really wants this, because if they're interested in being a nurse their first year, but then it turns out that they really hate the sight of blood, maybe changing how and what you do is going to be something that happens in your student's academic life. And that's fine. At a place like Lemoyne or a relatively small school, you can have other options so that it's not lost. Like it might be a good fit, but maybe that major wasn't the best fit. So you can find something next door where you can still advance and again, graduate with something that can help you with your career. So that's what I would ask folks to kind of focus on is big picture stuff, because you can whittle down to the smaller details as you get closer. But big picture, you want to make sure that you're steering your cruise ship, if you will, towards the right sunset.
Very good. Kent, last question.
Yeah, we've got one last question, and we ask all our guests to look into the future a bit. So looking at 5 to 10 years, demographic shifts, fast evolution, emphasis on access, combined with growing skepticism about the value of a college degree, and lots of financial pressures for colleges, especially small colleges. How do you see the future of financial aid unfolding? What happens next? And what role do small colleges like Lemoyne play in the future of higher ed?
I really see financial aid having to grow out of the reliance on a standard term for a traditional student, right? So an 18-year-old that is here for 2 semesters a year, that's going to be here for 8 total semesters, and then graduating, right? And then living their best life. In financial aid in particular, I think we got to get ready for mini sessions or modules, 8-week terms, more adult learners, maybe some smaller credential things that kind of stack up to a bachelor's over time or stack up to something that can eventually, right, become a bachelor's degree over time, which means that traditionally what we rely on, 15 or 16 weeks, 2 terms per year, 18-year-old with limited credit history, all of these things these things are not going to be so universal 5 to 10 years from now. We're going to be educating folks at a variety of ages, at a variety of times, at a variety of credential levels, in a variety of areas that might change from Syracuse, New York to Baton Rouge, Louisiana to Boulder, Colorado, or like Tacoma, Washington, right? It's going to be different for each place. So that's what I kind of forecast 5 to 10 years from now is really needing to know the calendar restraints of your software and where your software can give you flexibility. Because if software cannot be flexible for you, it means that you got to do it manually, which means that you need more human hours. More human hours means a bigger budget for your staff. So you kind of have to walk within this line of, are we able to find improvements on the software side that would mitigate the need for additional humans? Or are we going to start with humans and then see where we can kind of backfill through software improvements? I know folks are really worried and engaged on the AI front, and that's appropriate. But if you've seen some of these systems that schools are using, you know that AI isn't anywhere near this. And a wholesale improvement for a school is really a drastic and significant resource drain to be able to introduce some of these flexibilities. So you're kind of stuck with, all right, well, we got this software. It's going to be okay for at least 3 to 5 years, but we want to implement this new program. How do we implement it with what we have? Can we add people? Well, there might not be resources. How do you do it with this? How do you do it with that? It's going to be a lot of dancing like that. That's what I forecast in the financial aid offices of the very near future of 2031 and beyond, if you will.
Awesome. Thank you. Great perspective on that.
Well, I'm afraid we are out of time. And Maximo, I want to thank you for this conversation. It's a reminder that behind every financial aid office, there's somebody who truly cares about whether students are going to be able to get to the starting line. So I want to thank you for your expertise and for your candor and the work that you do for Moyne every day. For those listening or viewing, if you'd like to learn more about Small College America, go to our webpage at smallcollegeamerica.net, where you can find details on upcoming episodes, contact us, suggest topics you'd like us to cover. I also encourage you to subscribe, of course, to our series on your favorite podcast network. This episode of I can't even say our own name. This episode of Small College America is made possible with underwriting support from Edu Alliance Group, a higher education consulting firm that champions small colleges and communities they serve. And if your college or university is involved in podcasting, make sure to check out an upcoming conference that's happening in Cleveland, Ohio called Higher Ed PodCon, which will be in July 16 and 17. I know many of you are involved in podcasting. It's a great opportunity for professional development and networking with others doing this work in higher education. Go to WHigherEdPodCon for details. On behalf of our guest, Maximo Flint-Morgan, my co-host, Kent Barnds, and I, thank you for joining us.